December 24th, 1969. 5 warships slip out of a French harbor in the middle of a Force 9 gale, running dark, flying no flag anyone can identify. And here's the part that should be impossible. Every single one of those ships is already legally owned by the country everyone's about to accuse of stealing them. Paid for. In full. In cash. This is the story of how the Israeli Navy stole its own boats from a NATO ally using a fake Norwegian company, a retired admiral with a very flexible relationship with the word illegal, and a level of bureaucratic deception that would make a tax lawyer blush. Every operation, every decision, this is Battleground Zero. Start 2 years earlier, because that's where this gets its motive. October 167. The Israeli destroyer INS Eilat is sailing off Port Said, an aging former British warship doing routine patrol work, the kind of job that had been unremarkable for decades. Then 2 Egyptian patrol boats, small, cheap, Soviet-supplied Komar-class boats that most navies wouldn't have bothered escorting, fire 3 -15 Termit missiles from over the horizon. The Eilat never sees them coming. It takes 3 hits and sinks, and 47 Israeli sailors die. It is the first time in history a warship is sunk by an anti-ship missile, and it takes about 11 minutes to make every big-gun navy on the planet look like it's still fighting the last war. The lesson lands hard in Tel Aviv. Guns are obsolete, missiles are the future, and Israel does not have a single boat built for this new kind of fight. So Israel goes shopping, and the obvious shop at the time is France, a genuine ally in the late 1960s, happy to sell weapons and happy to build them. Israel commissions 12 Sa'ar-class missile boats from a shipyard in Cherbourg, on the English Channel, fast, armed with homegrown Gabriel missiles, exactly the answer to what just happened to the Eilat. And for a while, this works fine. Boats get built, boats get delivered, everyone's happy. Then the politics catch up. The Six-Day War in 1967 makes France recalculate its friendships in the Middle East, and President Charles de Gaulle starts tightening the tap. By late 1968, an Israeli commando raid on Beirut airport, retaliation for an attack on an Israeli airliner in Athens, gives de Gaulle the excuse he's been waiting for. In January 1969, France slaps a full arms embargo on Israel. No exceptions, no more shipments, full stop. And sitting in Cherbourg harbor at the exact moment the embargo lands are 5 more SAR boats. Built, tested, paid for, legally the property of the Israeli Navy, and now officially going nowhere. If you like your military disasters served with a side of, wait, they actually did that? This is the channel for it. Hit subscribe, because we've got a new one of these every week, and none of them get less ridiculous. For months, Israeli officials try the polite route. They're told the embargo is temporary. They wait. De Gaulle retires in 1969, Georges Pompidou takes over, and for a moment, there's hope the whole thing gets quietly reversed. It doesn't. The embargo just stays. No political will to lift it, no timeline, nothing. Which means Israel is now stuck in the worst kind of limbo, 5 warships it desperately needs, sitting fully built 40 feet from open water, and not one legal path to get them home. Enter Rear Admiral Mordecai Momo Limon, head of Israel's defense mission in Paris, and the man who's about to turn "we paid for these, give them back" into an actual heist. Limon starts floating the obvious question inside the Israeli government: what if we just take them? Prime Minister Golda Meir's initial answer is a hard no, nothing illegal, full stop, official policy. Limon's response to that, which he apparently said with a completely straight face, is one of the great quotes in Cold War military history. The distinction between legal and illegal may be no wider than a lawyer's comma. In the right circumstances, it may be wide enough to drive a missile boat squadron through. That's not a script line. That's a real Israeli admiral on the record, treating a naval heist as a grammar problem. The math on this plan is genuinely brutal, by the way, and it's worth sitting with for a second. Cherbourg to Haifa is over 3,000 kilometers of open ocean, in boats that are fast attack craft, not ocean liners. They were never built for a transatlantic length haul, and they definitely weren't built to do it without refueling. Someone floats the idea of strapping giant inflatable rubber fuel bladders to the decks to extend the range. This gets rejected almost immediately, for the extremely reasonable reason that turning your escape boats into floating fuel bombs is a bad plan, even by the standards of an already illegal plan. So Limon goes with something slower and much sneakier. He doesn't sneak the boats out. He sells them. Sort of. Through an old contact, he sets up a Norwegian shell company called Starboat, run by a genuine former Norwegian resistance fighter named Martin Siem, who, according to the story, got visibly excited at the chance to run one more deception operation against an occupying adjacent bureaucracy, decades after fighting actual Nazis. Starboat's cover story is that it needs fast supply boats for North Sea oil rigs. Nobody at the French Export Authority thinks to ask why an oil supply company needs 5 armed missile boats built for open war because, and this is the part that should embarrass an entire government, nobody at the French Export Authority asks much of anything. One customs official, informed point blank that the boats are headed for Israel and not Norway, reportedly just shrugs and says, "In that case, I'll sign," because half of France's own bureaucracy privately hated the embargo too. What follows is a genuinely absurd stack of paperwork. Publicly, the French shipbuilder sells the boats to Starboat. Starboat leases them to a legitimate Israeli oil exploration company for cover. That's the version the French government signs off on. Privately, and this is Limon's actual masterstroke, he quietly voids every one of those contracts behind the scenes, so ownership never actually leaves Israeli hands, while the paper trail everyone in Paris can see says otherwise. It's less a heist and more competitive level contract origami, and somehow it works. The close calls are where this stops being a spy thriller and starts being a comedy of near misses. A group of Israeli sailors flying into Paris to crew the boats get stopped by a French customs officer who looks them over, matching haircuts, matching jackets, passports numbered in sequence, and asks, in Hebrew, "Are you military?" One of them, in a panic, tries "We're students," which is not a great cover story for 4 men who look like they were all issued the same barber on the same day. The officer just tells them to relax. They haven't done anything illegal, and waves them through, which is either extremely lucky or proof that even French customs was tired of enforcing this embargo. Back in Cherbourg, the crews start loading full fuel tanks days before the operation, which raises the boat's waterlines high enough that anyone paying attention would notice, so they cover it by taking the boats out for routine sea testing every single day, repeatedly, in a foreign port, apparently without a single French official connecting the dots. And then, almost derailing the entire operation in the most mundane way imaginable, the dockside generators running to keep everything charged are loud enough that local residents start filing noise complaints with the harbor police. A multinational government deception operation, weeks in the making, nearly gets flagged by someone's neighbor who just wanted to sleep. By December 2020, Limon finalizes the private contracts that quietly reclaim ownership, and 2 days later, on Christmas Eve, deliberately chosen because half of France is off work and half of French officialdom is drunk on champagne, the final weather check comes back ugly. A Force 9 gale is barreling through the channel. At 2 in the morning, the crews find a short window and take it anyway. 5 missile boats slip out of Cherbourg harbor into genuinely dangerous seas, radio silent, running southwest through the Bay of Biscay in weather that would make most captains turn back voluntarily. By the time French officials realize the boats are gone, they've already committed to the cover story, insisting publicly that the boats are simply en route to Norway, a routine commercial delivery, nothing to see here. That lasts almost no time at all because the Norwegian ambassador in Paris is asked directly about Starboat and says he's never heard of it. It isn't even on Norway's business registry. An hour later, the Norwegian government confirms it. The boats aren't registered anywhere in the country they're supposedly headed to. The cover story collapses in public, in real time, while 5 armed Israeli warships are still somewhere in the Atlantic off the coast of Portugal, quietly refueling. Then comes the moment this whole operation earns its ending. Late on the 27th, as the flotilla threads the Strait of Gibraltar, a British signal station atop the rock flashes a routine query in Morse. What ship? The Israeli boats don't answer. A Royal Navy helicopter loops overhead, gets a good look, and peels off. 15 minutes later, a second signal arrives, this one in French, 3 words, Bon Voyage. a British commander, having clearly worked out exactly what he was looking at, decided the correct military response to watching an ally quietly humiliate France was to wish them well and let them go. The Israeli commander later wrote that it took the British 15 minutes to get their staff together, presumably to have a toast. Back in Paris, French Defense Minister Michel Deb, the man who'd championed the embargo in the first place, is reportedly furious enough to push for intercepting or even sinking the boats. The French Prime Minister overrules him, which is either restraint or an acknowledgement that starting a shooting war with an ally over 5 boats you already sold them would be a genuinely difficult headline to explain. As the flotilla crosses toward Crete, Israeli Air Force Phantoms show up overhead, low and fast, wings rocking in greeting, the unofficial signal that they've made it home free. Days after leaving Cherbourg, the boats sail into Haifa to crowds, press cameras, and a French government doing its best impression of a country that meant to do that. Officially, Paris downplays the entire affair, angry enough to save face with its Arab trading partners, quiet enough not to admit publicly that it had just been outmaneuvered by 5 boats and a shell company. Polling afterwards suggested most of the French public actually sided with Israel, not just out of sympathy, but because the whole episode made their own government look laughably inept. Here's the part that turns this from a good heist story into a genuinely important one. Those 5 boats, the ones nobody in the French bureaucracy could be bothered to properly track, go on to fight in the 1973 Yom Kippur War, at the Battle of Latakia, the first naval battle in history fought entirely with guided missiles on both sides. And it's a direct rematch of the exact problem that started this whole story. The same Soviet-designed Styx missiles that sank the Eilat back in 1967, fired now by the Syrian Navy against Israeli Sa'ar boats using electronic countermeasures and superior missile range to shoot first. Israel wins decisively without losing a single ship. The boats that had to be stolen from their own buyer end up rewriting the rules of naval warfare twice in 6 years, once by getting sunk by a missile nobody respected, and once by surviving that exact missile because somebody bothered to fix the problem. So here's the actual takeaway, and it's not really about Israel or France specifically, it's about how thin the line is between diplomatic incident and creative accounting. An entire nation's naval doctrine got fixed not by winning a war, but by exploiting the gap between what a government approves on paper and what it actually bothers to check. Somewhere in Paris, there's a customs official who signed off on 5 missile boats going to an oil rig company, and either he's still kicking himself or he's telling this story at parties as the best decision he ever made. Either way, next time someone tells you paperwork is boring, remind them it once smuggled a navy across the Atlantic. Next briefing, we're staying in exactly this kind of gray area, a cartel that thought a homemade submarine made them untouchable, right up until it very much didn't. Every operation, every decision. See you then.